how do you do that? How do you apply the machine learning might of an LLM into a private organization without data leakage, without privacy issues, and while still using the full force of that LLM? I mean, do you just basically, you can't do it and you have to build your own LLM inside Clifford Chance or PwC or whatever it is, or can you do it? So I guess first question, can you actually do it? And if you can't, how do you get around it?
Well, I mean, I guess part of it depends on what organization's risk appetite is for. Now, like the extreme negative example is, I guess, a group of engineers at Samsung decided to put a bunch of proprietary or trade secret code straight into ChatGPT, probably to shortcut and get a report done, or I don't know exactly what the reason was, but next thing you know, it's basically recommitted to the base model, and so it's that would be kind of a worst case scenario, obviously, for a corporate legal or for a law firm. So I mean, I think we've been working a little bit with a couple firms on what sort of moderation layer or audit log of what people are using these systems for, so we could see what their inbound queries are. So one thing you can do, one technique out there for this type of thing is differential privacy, where you essentially, you can think of as you redact the parts that are important, like from a privacy perspective, but you're able to query a system. That's kind of that's version one of this.
Okay, let's just break down the technical language. So a lawyer in, let's say, X large law firm wants to put a query into the LLM. You will have an automated system that will strip out anything that's an identifier.
That would be the idea, and then they should do eyes on to double check it, because no system's going to have 100% performance on any but that's the principle. The principle is you basically pull out the identifying information, but you're able to use the system.
Interesting.
Now that is not free of issues. That is not free of issues. Because perhaps just the fact pattern itself, even with the information out of there, you could re-infer kind of what the fact pattern was about. Now, Microsoft has said that they are, and OpenAI has said that there's going to be, enterprise kind of access where there's not like data recommitment to the main model, which up to recently they literally say explicitly this is what we're doing. In a sense, we've all participated in the largest annotation exercise probably in human history. So thank you everybody for your service.
Including artificial lawyer, I'm told, has fed into this.
All everybody has. I mean, your blog, but also all the queries people have been putting in over the last whatever it's been several months have been recommitted back, and so you start to see with thumbs up, thumbs down, reinforcement learning going on, and so that's been very helpful. That's part of why OpenAI would have a big advantage over the next marginal competitor, because it's hard to going second. It's hard to replicate the amount of activity that took place, especially in the first few months of the year.
Right, when people were taking more risks and so forth.
Or they weren't thinking about it, and they were just putting all this stuff in there. So that's kind of one way to handle it. I think my personal thesis is that we will start to see people building their own LLMs. The unit economics of that are massively decreasing every single day, and there's more and more clever stuff. I'm happy to say I believe people will be able to figure out how to have their own versions of these on the inside eventually. The timeline is unclear. It's about how much cheaper stuff will get over time, but
let's drill into that again. So when we're talking about cost, where does the money go? So obviously we're not paying for thousands of people in the Philippines to be tagging stuff like with natural language processing. We're talking about millions upon millions of high-grade NVIDIA chips or something.
Yeah, you need a bunch of GPUs, although fewer of them. One of the things, if you look at GPT 3.5 Turbo, what they've learned is once you build a big model, you actually can compress that model down to a much smaller version that has almost the same performance with like a tenth of the cost or something like this. And this is really always the story in technology. People start with X and things get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And there's so many people focused on this problem. I literally wake up every day and I see on archive another 10 papers, from a bunch of people who are working on little bits of the problem, whether it's on the hardware side about how to, optimize or increase the speed of hardware. There's even better chips being produced. I mean, Google just announced a chip that's like 70% faster. I mean, it's just all of this stuff is cooking all at once. And I think if you look at what Bloomberg did, I think that's a kind of harbinger of what we might expect going forward for our space, which is they bought their own GPUs and built Bloomberg GPT, which really it's not an open AI thing. It's they use GPT in the name, but it's really they from first principles took their massive corpus of information and all that financial information and built essentially a financial LLM,
Interesting.
large language model.
So I mean, so perhaps we're in the kind of MySpace, kind of territory, and that many of the things we're excited about now will be gone in about 2 or 3 years, and it'll be like ancient history, and there will be new.
I really think that. I think that I mean, OpenAI got the jump on a bunch of other people, but I mean, it's just this is not even close to over. And just because Bard wasn't bulletproof on the first version doesn't mean this is going to continue. And Amazon has an offering now, this Titan offering. Bard will get better. DeepMind has their own I mean, there's just a bunch. There's Anthropic, Claude, there's all these different models that are already out there. And that's kind of from the general tech companies. And then I do expect these kind of domain models to show up, which like you can Law GPT, if you will.
Yeah.
And there may be multiple of those.
Isn't that what I mean? I don't think it's any trade secret here that that Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis did this with NLP. They sat back, they saw all these new startups pop up, including yours and others, back in the day, and then they figured it out and they integrated it into knowledge management and search, and did well from it. And do you think that's basically what's going to happen? That they're right as we speak, they're busily building this stuff themselves.
Yeah, I think they're going to figure out. I think that. Well, I believe in the next 12 to 24 months, there's going to be quite a bit of M&A activity around a bunch of the providers within our space, including kind of the general providers like a Westlaw or a Lexis or Wolters Kluwer, or those kind of folks, and then even like the CLMs, ELM kind of folks as well, and kind of other providers are going to figure out, okay, can we build this ourselves? Do we need to buy somebody who knows how to do this? How does this going to integrate? I mean, they have a lot of advantages. They already have customers. They've done a lot of the things right. And so the question is, how do you add this puzzle piece to the equation? And I think that's what I would expect reasonably to happen over the next, and then, the first people through the wall, meaning the first technologies or the first GPT-4 to market folks, some of them will be there at the end, but others will, there is sometimes sort of second mover advantage in the sense that going first, you have to do a lot of market education. And I mean, we even saw this a little bit in the last wave of legal tech, is some of the companies that weren't the very first through, they got to wait till the world had been educated a little bit, and then you kind of come behind the first folks who had to really spend a lot of effort to teach the market. I mean, if you think about going back 5 and 10 years, especially closer to 10 years, I mean, go into a law firm, people didn't really know a lot about a lot of this stuff, and so there was a lot of market education you had to do just to get people to the water's edge of thinking about buying something. And now, I mean, a lot of that's been normalized now. So the buyers are a lot more sophisticated than they were 10 years ago.
Although, I could dredge up, and I'm sure you could too, hundreds of stories and anecdotes about, the early days of legal AI, but, let's save that for another day. But one thing that struck me was that ChatGPT, with all of its problems, particularly the hallucination issue, which is, if you say to a lawyer, hey, don't worry about the details, it's just it's the worst possible thing you can say to
you can't say that.
It'll be fine. Don't worry that paragraph 3 is completely made up, or don't worry that court case didn't actually ever happen. They don't like that, understandably and quite rightly. Do you think that ChatGPT actually muddied the waters a bit for GPT-4, which is much, much more usable and professional, and that lawyers, whenever you mention generative AI, they go, oh, that's that thing that makes stuff up, and we've almost got to kind of clean that up a bit?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, if you look on LinkedIn over the last several months, the test that people do is they put one query in to a system, look at the output, and that's kind of like the up or down determination of the quality of the overall capabilities here, which I'd say is not really a very rigorous way to go about it. I mean, first of all, who says these things have to be zero shot? Where zero shot means I put a single query in and I get a returned result. Now, it's already been shown in multiple applications that these kind of sequential question answer, sequential dialogues or chains of thought are much better at kind of reaching, a correct answer. GPT-4 has a lot fewer hallucinations, not zero. You can connect what they call retrieval augmentation, which is you can say, this passage here, where is the, you think of it as like, you take that text that you just generated and say, what source in the world is connected to this piece of text? And so I can actually validate that this is a real citation to a real thing. One of the things we saw in the bar exam is there's a thing you could call hallucination in one of the problems. It is not a correct, it cited a real rule of evidence. It discusses it. It's just out of scope for the question that was answered, but it was, I would say, like a very close or adjacent idea. And it's like what a student would do on an exam if it didn't know the answer. A student didn't know the answer. They'd say, oh, well, let me just write something that's the closest I can think of. And like, is that a hallucination? I don't know. I mean, it's not a made up source and it's not a totally incorrect thing. It's just kind of out of scope for the question as asked.
Yeah, but I mean, for lawyers particularly, precision is paramount, because any contract they produce, they might get dragged into court over at some point, or their client will be, and they're going to have to defend every word of it.
No doubt. And I should just mention that example was a ChatGPT mistake, not a GPT-4. GPT-4 did not make that same error.
Will we get
just a side by side? You could see. I think the problem with ChatGPT is you to see the errors in it, you have to really know the details of the problems. Like even on our bar exam thing, you have to actually look and know, okay, that's not really what you should say here. Because on its face, if you didn't know, it sounds right. It sounds okay.
Well, I mean, that's what threw me. I mean, I'll be honest, I was very skeptical at the beginning particularly with ChatGPT, because I was, I got to it fairly early and I put a ton of stuff into it, and the results were like terrifying. It was so, because they weren't just like wrong. They were wrong with the absolute confidence of someone who knows they're right and is brilliantly and beautifully competent in saying what they say. And
right.
And so I tested it on a few things that I knew, the small, little fields of knowledge that I had, which I felt pretty confident of, and it was just a travesty. And I was like, my God, this is really dangerous stuff. And then GPT-4 came along, and it's like, no, we've just had a quantum leap in front,
Yeah.
Are we gonna get to a point where you won't have any hallucinations, or are hallucinations part of LLMs in the same way that catching the flu is part of being human?
Yeah, it's like saying, are we going to have a system with a 0% error rate? That seems very implausible. Can we reduce that substantially? Yeah, that's already been done. Again, if you connect, it's very important that people see the difference between a zero shot analysis, meaning I put in a query, I get a result. Yeah, maybe I do some prompt, I do a prompt engineering or whatever, but versus something where I then do retrieval augmentation, I connect a plugin, I do some other stuff with it to kind of validate the outputs. What we're seeing in the overall generative AI space is the growth of a whole ecosystem of tools that would sit around the output and help you do things like validate this. Hey, does this passage have a source in reality that is connected to, like these sorts of things. Now, the very first version that people got their hands on didn't have all of that, but every week we're seeing kind of new techniques. And again, I think this whole set of plugins is really interesting as a way to kind of, like, one of the things that the systems were not historically good at is kind of math, right? But connecting to Wolfram, Wolfram has Mathematica, which is widely used in the science and engineering community to do mathematics. So if you can't do the math, you just call Wolfram, and Wolfram does the math, and so if you think of that principle and you generalize it, there's a lot of things where you connect multiple pieces of technology together and you start to remedy some of these issues. Can you get the error rate to zero? Probably not. I mean, the dirty secret of our space is we don't exactly have a 0% error rate in our field. It's just a lie we tell ourselves, right? Not even close.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, okay.
So I think that's where this is heading.
Anyway. That's fascinating. It really, really, really is. So just sort of round off, I mean, To me, it feels like the number one area that's going to be impacted is knowledge management, because it's going to be like, it'll be knowledge management and first draft document creation. Due diligence, I'm not sure how far that's going to go, because I think the problem with due diligence, as Kira and Luminance and others found out pretty early on, is that it cuts so aggressively into the business model. It will be used in certain jobs, but that's probably not the first thing to break. But knowledge management, it's just so perfectly fitted for an LLM, isn't it? I mean, do you feel
Yeah.
that's what's going to
No,
go?
I agree with you on that. I mean, I think e-discovery too is another place where, you
Mm,
know, anywhere where the task, I mean, on the diligence side, and I think like even I can remember Noah from Kira slash Zuva, I think is his new company,
mm,
talking like years ago. It's like, well, if the cost of something comes down, maybe there's a bunch of diligence people don't do today because it's too cost prohibitive. So you sort of do the human layer of diligence, and then you have this kind of machine secondary layer that you just wouldn't historically have done, and maybe you're able to identify things there that are useful. So I mean, that's easily a way I can see where it's an add-on to what people have already done that helps create more value, but it isn't like, oh, we're going to just have machines do all the diligence or something like that.
yeah.
That I could see as complementary to to the existing kind of economic model.
And would you say, I mean, someone I know said recently that, doc automation is dead because LLMs will just do it for you.
I think as we understand it or know it today, it's hard to see it's hard to see how the traditional way of doing doc automation would survive a world where, of what people have already seen. And it's not like things are going to get worse tomorrow in this area. They're going to continue to improve. So we will have doc automation. It's just the means by which we do said doc automation is the question.
So all the
Uh,
doc automation companies really need to bring in the LLM capability.
I
Otherwise,
mean, it seems like this is existential, but I actually think this is existential to lots of people in the sense that not that this replaces the entire tool, it's that they built. It's that if we have two competitors and one adds generative AI features and the other one doesn't, people say, well, gee, I'd like to have everything I already had plus these other features, and y'all don't have the features, so I'm going to go over here to them. And so this is part of why I think there'll be a lot of M&A activity, because people always start with these things of, it's not important. Okay, it is important. We can do it ourselves. But then you ask yourself, if you could do it yourself, why didn't you already do it? You didn't do it because the folks that you have weren't the ones who were going to, they're more to mine the store, but not to create the net new thing. This is why then people say, let's go buy a startup. And this is kind of the arc that these things went on. And you mentioned the last time, like a lot of the big providers went on acquisition sprees over the last, Latera, obviously the Thomson Reuters and Lexuses and so forth of the world, Walters Kluwer and what have you. And then even in like the ELM space, your audits, your the CLM folks as well, like whatever. They bought pieces that they felt presumably that they couldn't build themselves or couldn't build up fast enough, or hey, this is the one puzzle piece we need that's really going to help us with XYZ customers. So I really expect that, you went on this sabbatical, Richard. You went on this sabbatical, and now it's like you'd be writing 8 stories a day. You need GPT just to kind of keep the volume of stories you'd have to write every single day. When you come back from the sabbatical, it's going to be M&A activity galore. That's my prediction. So,
well, yeah, no, I mean,
you're going to need a whole staff of GPTs to write for you.
oh yeah, well that may be the case, but just very 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 last question, which is about ALSPs, which sort of beyond
Yeah.
legal, but I've always believed that the two are integrated. They're doing the same thing, one with people, one with technology. Does generative AI undermine the ALSP model, or actually, in fact, is the ALSP really coming of age? But with this combination of generative AI, people who are very specifically working on certain strips of work, tracts of land, as it were, as opposed to trying to be much, much broader, this is the perfect scenario.
I mean, I think that's really on a case-by-case basis. In principle, this should be a technology first kind of human second kind of version of the ALSP, because the best thing ALSP has going for it is they have a big pile of work that's highly amenable to these tools. Whereas if you went to a law firm or even some pockets of corporate legal, it's like, well, hey, if you're a person there, Richard, be like, hey, I got 8 minutes of your day here and 12 minutes here and 2 minutes there and 7 minutes there where these tools could help you, and it would add up to an hour a day, but it's a little bit here, a little bit there, and you might say, I don't know, I'll just kind of go on with it. But if you go to a place where there's a huge pile of tasks that are highly amenable, then the economies of scale really kind of highly justify zeroing in and focusing on that. Culturally, the question is, those businesses historically have been body shops where they sell they're kind of not that different than a law firm. They're just different price point. They sell people to do tasks all day with a little to modest amount of automation. And so the question is, are they going to be able to flip the entire thing around and kind of be automation first? I personally believe that this is where private equity is really they're the people that typically come in and focus on doing these flips from one model to another. And so I think that the ALSPs, particularly where private equities in the mix, are going to be uniquely positioned to kind of turn the crank and say, well, if we need cash to like infuse a bunch of tech in here and flip the model around where it's kind of tech first, people second, then so be it, because we could have massive margin expansion from doing that. But it's just a question of, can people turn the organization kind of more on its head historically? Because again, all those businesses got every outsourcing business, by the way, beyond legal, sort of starts this way. They say, well, we can get the same task done, but at a lower cost location with of like similar-ish quality. And then people move into other parts of the competitive continuum. So I think it'll be a very interesting time, but ALSPs and principals should be able to, because they have the pile of tasks that are highly amenable, that they're in a very nice position to really focus their attention on how to get the most out of these tools and to train their people to use these tools to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah, that for me is really going to be central to the next stage.
That's
it really is.
That's the key. Yeah, the human capital piece. I mean, what we see people kind of fooling around with prompt engineering a little bit. I don't even know if people really in our space doing too much with plugins and other things like that. They will eventually, but I think the ecosystem changing every 5 minutes, it seems like. So it's hard to keep. I mean, I'm on it all day, every day, and it's hard to keep up with it all.
Well, that's my very last question to you, to sum up. And as people probably have seen in the news, you've launched a new venture, and just briefly, let's just talk about that. So you were at Elevate, you left, you'd sold your own business to them, which was an NLP business. You're now doing your own thing. What is your new project?
Well, the company is called 273 Ventures right here, but we're building this, what we call a legal data operating system, which is basically the principle is we have a bunch of disparate IT systems and trying to create a layer that connects at the data layer all of the different kind of streams of information. So in the general tech world, there's something like say a Snowflake or a Databricks. Those are kind of general purpose versions of this idea, and we're trying to kind of do a legal domain specific version of that kind of idea. We're in the early days, but it's going okay so far. It's exciting, and it's just an exciting time overall, I think, for our field, because it's like another kind of AI kind of summer for legal, I guess.
Yeah, and I think this time it's going to last. It's definitely going to last, this one. So thanks, Dan. It's been a real pleasure, a really interesting conversation. And if you're listening to this, Dan will be giving a keynote at Legal Innovators California on June 7th and 8th in San Francisco. And I hope you can join us. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.